Okay. Yeah. So if you spent a lot of time on this, there would be questions. If you're new at this, there would be some questions, but the more you spend with the energy, there would be a lot of questions. So what would be a year? This energy, what would be 2 years? Would be 3 years. There would be many layers. So on my part, I've been doing this for 16 years. I'm going to bring up 16 years worth of questions and what the energy brings about as answers. So you just have to sit back and witness a lot of the patterns that would unfold, not just in your present moment, but in the future. But because of the intensity this energy is experiencing, I'm sure a lot of the future questions are already up and coming, maybe even present in a lot of your spaces. So in general, let's start with the question, how do we know what can be held? In relation to the music, in relation to the energy wave, in relation to body touch, in relation to emotion, to the words, how do you know what is said, what is sounded? Like how do you move across the space? How do you navigate it? Is it just wild, or is there like a pattern? So I do a lot of talks. I get invited to a lot of groups, and I would shortcut what I'm about to share in about 30 minutes. We have 3 hours to go over this. And this is going to be maybe the main call for our 3 months. This is where we provide a fulcrum. It's the last week of our first month. Sorry, Lynn. Having trouble hearing and seeing you. Is that the same for others? Okay, I see people. So I think it's your connection, maybe, Lynn. Where was I? Yeah, so pattern recognition is what comes through consciousness when there are a lot of bits of information that's given to you. You can have this in art or music. When you're impacted by a world of ideas and sensory inputs, the mind would create stories and then would see patterns. If you looked at or listened to things long enough. In the energy, there is the rising and falling. Something goes up, something is bound to come down. And when it comes down, it's bound to go up again. So in general, this is what facilitators would discover, that I need to raise the vibration. But often I can raise that by lowering another vibration. So what are these vibrations anyway? How do I know how to lift something up and to bring something down? In innerdance, there are these patterns, and they're not patterns set by me. They're not by people per se. They're actually coming from nature. To be more exact, they're coming from our relationship with nature. Now nature can be everything. It could be the nature in people, like human nature. It could be the nature of Mother Earth. It could be the nature of the sun or the nature of the moon, the nature of light, the nature of dark. The pattern is old. This is one of the first things we have to consider. It's not new. It doesn't just belong to this day and age. It's because we've been on Earth for a long time. So the pattern is more or less our legacy. When I first came upon this energy, maybe 20 to 25 years ago, I was just listening to this voice, and it said there's a pattern. There's a pattern there. So inner dance helped me to see the pattern. It's acoustic in nature. It exists as a song inside our body. You know, the Aboriginals called it the song lines. It's a kind of song line in your system that coordinates the rising and falling, just like a song would rise and fall from the intro to the verse, the refrain, the chorus, the coda. The same thing happens inside your body. So we need to listen to the guidance mechanisms of the songline. But first off, it's important to say that this pattern is really old because we've been here a long time. Like ego, in a way, is what says, no, I haven't been here a long time. I just got here 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But something was inherited, something's passed on. So you're actually really, really old. And it's the rhythm, it's the pattern that gets passed on. And that pattern regulates your heartbeat, your brain waves, your breathing, your cells, your everything about you has that oldness. So you didn't really learn things from scratch when you first came here. This pattern regulates dream. It regulates how you unravel through time and space. And it's really interesting where you might have chosen to be born and then to later live in. You are indoctrinated into a huge pattern, but there's small cultural or geographic patterns that are particular to your place in the world that you vibe to, that you hold resonance to. So let's jump into it quick. Okay, let's arrange our. Let's go into our slides today. I think we need to go into the slides today. Wait, sorry, this is a bit messy. So I can't even remember what we went over in the last calls, but this is really what's up and coming now. Understanding the inner dance as a waveform. This is what we want to study. Inner dance is this wave, traditionally anyway. This is how it was experienced over a long period in the history of this energy when it unraveled starting 16 years ago. So we can perceive this in terms of the energy itself. At the same time, this is most perceivable in the music. And I know that a lot of you are interested in the role vibration plays as it's become the main tool that enhances or activates this energy. So very quickly, we'll name it. It's called the circadian rhythm, most specifically the sleep cycles that are mimicked during the inner dance state. Okay, the circadian rhythm organizes your relationship between the day-night cycle. Okay, so circadian meaning circadian, more or less, what is your 24-hour rhythm? What is your 24-hour cycle? So there's something interesting about this. When you look at this wave that's here on the screen, this could signify maybe 24 hours. This could signify day or night, where, let's say, when you wake up in the day, your energy would go up and then it might go down. There might be up and down motions, but specifically when you're sleeping, let's say this is your eye. When your eyes are closed at night, you follow the same pattern. basically. So this is the innerdance playlist, in fact, that follows the 12 stages. And how else you might see it is this could be the waves that your life actually unfolds through. So you first wake up as a baby, the energy rises and then it drops at a certain point and then it rises. So the wave could be shareable. So a lot of people would state that, oh, okay, in an hour, I looked at my whole life. I went into a life review. I went into a near-death experience where I saw from the beginning, from the womb, all the way till I died. That's a typical sharing that I've been listening to for more than a decade now in inner dance. Some people would say, oh, no, I actually went through my whole day when I woke up all the way until I slept. But then the same pattern might even hold the beginning of Earth, when Earth was born, and then people would see the planet growing. You know, the flowers, the waters, the soil, animals, dinosaurs, all in the space of an hour. There would be that growth. Or some people would go even further back. Oh, okay, like I saw from the Big Bang, the birth of the universe, and then it just kept growing into galaxies and stars, planets, moons. Um, it's very interesting how the same wave might signify any of those dimensionalities, depending on what you might be holding in the field. If people are interested in their own person, then you'd hold the personal energy. If you're interested in the cosmic, to help people remember themselves as galaxies, that's what you would hold. Or if you're interested in the Earth Mother, then what you would speak and what you would embody would be according to that. But it would actually be the same wave that Earth rises and falls because it's exposed to the same kind of energy you're in between in terms of light and dark and hot and cold, electricity and magnetism. So is the universe bound by the same cosmic forces? Um, so that wave could be looked at again and again. But what's interesting is that it is embedded somehow in the body. So vibrationally, what's interesting is these are waveforms. These are neural oscillations. These are brain states. So from delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. From the moment of sleep when we wake, maybe we come more from here when we're sleeping. But when we go to sleep, when you close your eyes, you might come from here and then you might then go down. A lot of people believe that when you sleep, the 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 energy might look more like, okay, I was awake here, and then my mind would probably just go down, and then I would be relaxed the whole way through. That's not true. What's interesting about sleep is that something actually wakes up and even vibrates in frequencies a lot higher than when we were awake. So that what they call the dream state is in fact named as well paradoxical sleep. We're sleeping, in fact, to wake something up. We're waking up the higher energies that are usually, in fact, depressed when we're awake. Um, so that's one explanation of for why do we sleep at all? We think we know sleep because that's what we do. But when I was living on the island on a coconut diet, or sometimes not even eating any food at all, I I, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to sleep. I didn't want to sleep because my body didn't know sleep. I was sometimes sleeping maybe 5 hours, 10 hours the whole week. Um, when you find certain conditions that allow you to connect so deeply to nature, sleep actually goes away. Sleep is an escape mechanism. It means that if you are able to coordinate the waves somehow, what you're gaining in sleep, you can gain when you're awake. So a lot of you probably notice that when you do this work, this inner dance work, this Kundalini work, something happens to your sleep patterns. You're not sleeping so much, or it could be the opposite. You're sleeping a lot more, and then you experience this wave where you're not sleepy and you're trying to sleep out of habit because it's that time of the day when you're supposed to. So sleep is an adjustment mechanism, and dream time is one of the most interesting inquiries in science, not just in spiritual science, but science itself is so interested in what happens when we dream. And could it be that we're actually experiencing dream time while awake? Because the energy is mimicking the sleep cycles. We're actually pushing towards us what takes place during that really magical time, the rare magical time when we go through the adjustments. Um, okay, so let's go back to the screen. So to describe how this works, there are these stages, yeah? Um, sorry, let's make this white. There are stages in the sleep cycle specifically that are traceable. This is N1, yeah, N2, and then this is N3. These terms are very useful for understanding how an inner dance process could be structured. N1 is the first stage of sleep, N2 is the second stage. And there used to be N2, N3, and N4, but this has been simplified in the literature. This is N3, and then this REM state. So in the beginning of N1, the body just starts to relax. In a way, something actually does fall down, but for the real energy to fall down, for consciousness to really undergo a deep dive, there has to be a spike of the energy that performs kind of release, a physical, energetic, mental release of tensions that were accumulated during the day when we were maybe here in wake states. So when we move over to sleep stages, we need to actually undergo this very interesting rising of vibration of neural oscillations before we go into a deep process. So in terms of your choices in music, when you sequence or select music, this is the pattern that you usually follow, and there's not really four. Okay, so here this would be akin or alike N2, so that you can integrate. When you go to sleep, this is not really what it looks like per se. It would look more like a series of waves. This model sort of looks different, but it's not as useful for us because the brain states aren't as represented here. There's a delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. But this model still is useful to look at the fact that, okay, this is a cycle, and then this is a cycle, and then this is a cycle, and then this is another cycle. So within a 4 hour 4 hour sleep, you would have 5 to 6 of these cycles. I only encircled 4, but when you look at non-REM going into wake, there's 5 non-REM stages, and some people go all the way up until 6. So for that reason, a playlist most effectively is perceived to be 90 minutes long because when you measure one particular sleep cycle, it would be around 1.5 hours. It would be around 1.5 hours or 90 minutes. So a lot of people would do 60 minutes for one particular inner dance, but when you follow the actual rhythms that are coordinated in our sleep processes, it's as long as 90 minutes. So traditionally it's 90 minutes. But we've learned how to alter the energy waves. So in fact, you can hold 40 minutes, you can hold 30 minutes if you know how to bring the stages that are experiencing healing and transformation a lot sooner. So this is what you're going for. This is the space in which this is the space in which delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma are simultaneously spread out in activation states throughout a great region of the brain. Whereas when we're awake, there is a sense of localization where mostly we are operating between alpha and beta states, depending on how alert or work-based we are. When we're kind of going into sleep stages, we kind of get drowsy, and then the energy rises and falls, so that we would go into this magical dream time. Okay, so REM state merely explains or wonders at the simultaneous co-activation of all of these different states of awareness, whether it be the super deep consciousness or kind of drowsy, daydreaming, alert, and in hyper consciousness levels. Based on this, you can have fun. You can start to explicate. You can start to extract. You can start to navigate across the field, so that you can make things up. One of the things people wonder is, where's my creativity in this? Where can I be like an artist? Where can I make things up? But at the same time, one of the things people ask is, okay, that's important to be creative, but where's the pattern? Because creativity, in fact, isn't just making things up. You need to be bound by certain rules in music. There's consonance or dissonance in art. There's what is aesthetic and what is not aesthetic. So in terms of the energy work, there are also boundaries that are consistent that allow our creativity to fall on top of. That you do have an infinite array of possibility of how to hold people's hearts and bodies. You have like an infinite array of to choose whatever vibration or sound or musical piece you would like to evoke, whether it be like an emotion or an awareness, an idea, a physical bodily status, right? So the wave gives you that platform for consistency. And it's not in the energy that you hold per se, it's in the body. It's basically the the rhythm is basically the clock. Okay, it's the clock. It sets time. It helps anyone to set time, and all you have to do is to travel to another part of the world to change the clock. So even if you're not exposed to night and day in that new country, you'd actually need to adjust clocks. So the circadian rhythms in relation to the autonomic nervous system, which we went over in the last Zoom call, the circadian rhythms coordinates the ANS, particularly the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. nervous system. Okay, the parasympathetic nervous system tells you when can I rest, when can I trust the space, when can I relax, when can I digest and process things. And the sympathetic nervous system coordinates the time of the day. When should I go to work? When should I focus? When should I achieve? When do I go into motivations, rewards? When do I get stressed out? Um, you can't just have these going on at the same time if you are to function in the world. I mean, traditionally anyway, right now we are learning to hold both. But through millions of years of evolution, we trained ourselves to accord to a certain pattern that would be coordinated with the pattern in other organisms, whether it be snails, butterflies, even bacteria have circadian rhythms. Mice, ants, birds, we like most organisms have this rhythm, and there's similarities. Even plants actually have these rhythms, so that if you remove a plant from daylight, even in a dark room, a plant would wilt and then would rise and wilt and rise according to the clock. So this coordination between wake and sleep has been imbued in us. It's not just, what kind of light we're absorbing through our eyes. Circadian rhythmicity is embedded in us so deeply. Even on a cellular level, we're finding out that the clockwork exists on a cellular level. It's not just according to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, part of the brain that we especially demand things from in the inner dance process. We're finding out the clock is not just there; it's in the cellular level. And when you hold the energy, you're changing the clock. You're shifting the clock, not just in your brain. On the cellular level, you're shifting the clock. The main point there is you're giving people time. People are suffering because they're lacking time. We're always in a hurry, and this is our fear. It's like there's no time. There's no time to waste. Time is money. I need to seize the day. I need to rush. I need to achieve. And what we're losing is time. So what you're actually giving people is time. And when you know how to create these shifts in the system, what happens is time actually opens up all the way to a cellular level. Like, does time slow? Does time go fast? It's probably both. So this is what you're managing, and you're using this wave. This wave is what allows you to be what in circadian rhythm science is called for German speakers out there, you would know this word. It's basically the Zeitgeber. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but in literal translation, it means the time giver, Zeitgeber, the time giver. So what you are is a time giver. You're giving people time, and anything that you ingest that shifts time perception. It could be like a drug, a drink, a food. It could be sound. It could be the words that you hear, certain images that either wake you up or put you to sleep, a stimulant or a depressant, an upper or a downer. This is a Zeitgeber. Anything that influences your circadian rhythm is a Zeitgeber. So the music, the sound, the way bodies are positioned, these are Zeitgebers. And what we're doing in the inner dance process is actually bringing together a concert or a symphony of Zeitgebers, from proprioception to kinesthesia to multisensory integration. Sound is just one of the tools. everything that you're using to create a situation where people can receive time, because that's what you're giving. Like, I offer you time. Time is my gift. How old are you? Would you like 100 years? Would you like 1,000 or 1,000,000? It's up to you. You can have all of that in the space of an hour. Then you ask them to lay down. That would do something. And then you ask them to close their eyes. That would do something. And then you slowly alter the wave. What that does is it alters time, because time has something to do with vibration. The rhythm that's holding the day organizes time. The heartbeat that beats according to a BPM, beats per minute. It organizes time, which brings about a certain dimensionality. So what you're doing is you're allowing people to move across dimensions of time, which then is space. When you move across time dimensions, time becomes space. This is what you're learning, in a way. So what would happen if someone laid down and closed their eyes? What would happen to time? So the body would receive these signals, these inputs, and you actually start to confuse it to go into the dream state while they're awake. This doesn't even need to be taught. This is so intuitive that many people across the world just figure it out, even without the frameworks, even without being given the actual understanding of what's happening. We somehow know how to do this because it's so universal within and outside of human experience. This wave is something that happens every single day. Do you know why it happens every single day? Because just as you need food and just as you need drink, you need not to sleep but to dream. When you stop dreaming, you die. You actually need to dream in order to sustain life, because dreaming is the event in which the lowest and the highest, the slowest and the fastest become one. Because when we awake, that's what we actually lose. We lose the extreme masculinity and femininity that then would go too much into particular brain states that isolate ourselves into control, into the inability to surrender, to let go, into becoming too motivated by our individual needs, losing our connection to the collective consciousness. We become personas, we become personalities, we become just like me versus you, not like us. Um, so think about dream all the time, like perceive dream. It is important like what you dream, but in this work, what is more important is how do you dream at all? And how are you in fact recreating that magical space more and more, so that you're not just dreaming while escaping, unconscious, in the unknown. You're actually dreaming awake. Uh, Even your eyes closed, figuratively, it's wide open, because you're perceiving even like a greater vista. You can even see more while your eyes are closed within that kind of space. So this is your trick. You are fooling the body to believe that it's about to go into dreamland, but because you're holding wakefulness there, you're not just going to switch them into sleep mode. They start to believe that, okay, it's safe enough to dream again. That's what you're doing. Okay, you're teaching people how to dream again. You can keep asking those questions like, what's your dream? Do you remember your dream? What was that dream? When you hold space, right? It's like, okay, what do I say? You can say that. It's like, okay, what was the dream? And then you'd be surprised that, okay, there was that one dream that I kept going back to, and then they remember, um Okay, so Zeitgeber. Okay, so out of all of these stages, the most important would probably be the one that needs to be talked about that has differentiation is this one, the N3 stage. This is the mysterious one. I shared the 12 stages video with you. And even though it actually happens here, the D knots, the dark night of the soul, um, it's here technically, but it's preempted. It's symbolically like this one. So in music, this is what we call in inner dance the delta drop. Okay, so when you let's before going into that, and it's useful to kind of mention that initially, the inner dance playlist does not look like this. It starts here. Okay, it's just important to understand when you go to sleep. In the beginning, your vibe, your mental body state would be somewhat between here, and then maybe it spikes up and it rises up. So to allow um participants, including us, to go into deep relaxation, deep rest, we need to start very, very slowly. Let's use red. We need to start down low. You guys think maybe any red, whatever's turkey. Let's turkey's important now. It starts low. Like your first music always starts here. Number one, when you start in terms of the 12 stages of the awakening process, this is called satisfaction. Okay, I don't want to write it down, it's too long. Satisfaction, you need people to settle, to trust. So you start down here so that this could possibly release here. Okay, it takes some minutes for people to go into a deep release in non-REM 3 stage. This is called slow wave sleep, and it would be the deepest delta that you would experience throughout the whole day when you don't give a flying F, you don't care, you let go. Okay, I don't want to think about anything anymore. I give up, I surrender, I crawl into the arms of Mother Divine. This is the most surrender you would experience throughout the whole day before you go into the dream. Okay, so more literally, I'm wrong because that happens several times here. Okay, it happens here. It happens five 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 times in this model, but deepest sleep happens only twice. So it does happen to you twice a day where you would totally let go, that then allows this to be possible. Let's go back to this other one. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to mimic the sleep stages that allows people to go into the deepest release possible. And what the rhythms tell us is, for that to be possible, we need to go through non-REM 1, which is to more or less start to let go, and then to throw out the garbage in N2 to release the tensions that have been accumulated throughout the day or throughout the life. In N2, you have these hypnic jerks and hypnagogic reflexes. When you sleep near someone, when they're early in sleep, you can see they're moving their bodies. They're tossing and turning, and that's happening in N2 stage. And if you watch them a little bit longer, they would go into this muscular paralysis where they're not moving anymore. It's as if they're close to death. That's when they're going into the deepest, slowest wave in sleep time. So when you when you create an inner dance system, a playlist, a and the people who trained in inner dance who then changed the name, they learned this enough. This was in all of the trainings, so a lot of the system works because this has been mimicked over and over again across the whole world. So wait, let's not go too far. We're still in stage one, satisfaction, and then since we explained that this is actually like an energy rising experience that then allows for a future letting go, then maybe there would be a second stage here and then the third stage here. Okay, let's clean this up. It's a little bit messy. Okay, so let's outline the stages. Maybe there would be stage one over here. And then if this is the actual playlist, it would rise up sort of there. Let's make this more accurate. Maybe, yeah, up to there, and then it would drop here. You're just mimicking this. It doesn't need to be exact because people aren't actually sleeping; they're awake. But you're mimicking it. You're bringing people into the same wave as close as possible so that they would arrive at the dream state. So this would be one, this would be two, and this would be three. So in the video that I shared, this would be satisfaction. This would be dissatisfaction, and then this would be threshold. Satisfaction is pretty much, okay, I trust the space. I'm okay, I'm satiated, I don't need anything right now, I'm relaxed. And then you slowly build it up. You let the energy start to rise up to first peak. This is the first peak over here before you go into the trough, the drop. Okay. So when it rises, then it needs to fall. So from satisfaction, dissatisfaction, and threshold, then number 4 would be the stage of release, where suddenly, because it rose up, something falls down. So then people begin to cry. People start to, or it could just be breathing deep. And then there's a state in which people actually seem to it would be here, like to maybe here, to kind of pass out. There would be this deep state. Even if it doesn't happen, you still need to take them there, and we'll explain that. Okay, so that would be N3. That would be the closest you would mimic N3. So let us at least spell that out. That's called disintegration. That's when the persona, the ego, the mind loses itself. It becomes it's gone. It's a goner. Like, okay, goodbye ego, goodbye control. Whether it happens or not, you would need to incorporate this into the work, because this is what biologically allows us to go here. It's the biological necessity that allows us to go into this one. For people who have been through so much disintegration, awakenings, which should happen here, illumination, so on and so forth, you don't really need to keep going into this wave. But in your practice, if there are people in the room who's been there never, or once or twice or thrice, there's still a lot to let go of and to disintegrate. So yeah, so N3, let's describe it. It's very, very deep. Its role are many. Its roles are many. But basically within this model, it's to make sure that you have enough delta. Okay? Defining what does it mean to go into a trance. It means you have enough delta, like 0, or let's say 0.4 or 0 to point to 4 hertz. Okay, or 0.5, more like 0.5 to 4 hertz. The slowest vibration, the slowest neural oscillation that you can hold in your body, and this usually shows up in the thalamus region of the brain, and it can spread in the cortical regions of the brain. It doesn't show up in all parts of the brain, but when it does show up here, it is what allows you to hold the higher frequencies. Okay, it's what allows you to hold the higher frequencies. When you are awake, it's actually really difficult to hold this. This is not so spread out. You're mostly maybe at the highest, like over here. So one of the reasons why you sleep and go into the dream is you can go higher, and even beyond gamma, there would be high oscillating frequencies, what's beyond 100 hertz. And that really, really spreads out. We'll explain what the function of those higher frequencies are. So this is not what you're interested in. You're already doing this when you're awake. This is really good at analyzing, solving problems, paying attention, focusing. But that is not enough. If you want access to greater amounts of information, you need to go higher. Basically, to reach those, you need enough slow wave energy. So a lot of facilitators make the mistake of trying to raise the vibe too much, and they don't go into vision work. They don't see things. They don't arrive at wisdom perception. They just keep going back to the session, back to the workshop. They just keep crying, releasing, moving their bodies, going into these shaking, spasmic motions again and again without gaining the benefits the true REM state actually brings about. And the common mistake has something to do with not incorporating the N3 stage, which in the 12 stages would be called disintegration. Ego still hasn't totally gone outside the window that allows like collective consciousness to come up through here. So let's maybe look at that from a musical perspective. Let me see, new share. Okay, so I guess my sound is on. There. Okay, I put on one of the apps in my computer. Okay, so the tracks are here. Here's an example of how you might start a process. Wait, so this menu is up here. I don't need it up. I can actually press play. Okay, who knows this device? It's covering the play button. Okay, maybe I'm not meant to use DJ Pro. Let's just use my my iTunes. So how we normally would start a session would be something very, very, very slow. Okay, it's not happening. Maybe there's a setting in my computer. Okay, this would play. Okay, so you can't hear anything because my loopback needs to. Okay. Okay, so what that would signify is this part over here. That would be the first stage. You could say that's the first track that allows people to reach levels of satisfaction. And then what you would do later would be to build on that. So let me show you some common tracks that facilitators around the world used to use to bring people into okay, so it's not too much. It allows the energy to start building slow. So that could be stage number 2. And then they would take that all the way to a peak point. So number 3, for example, okay, maybe it doesn't go that high. Number 3 wouldn't go so high yet. You would just raise it enough so that the body would go into velocities and activations that would release enough. If you try to raise that up too high, the body isn't ready yet. The higher waves are made possible here. Exactly as we said, people need to drop first for the faster waves to come. If you try to raise it up high in the beginning, and instead of doing waves, you would just do that, okay, this is my session, like let's make it go up. And some people, they don't even do that gradually. It's like, okay, let's just do that. Let's try to make things go as high as possible, as early as possible, and maintain the high. Just keep going high, no low energies. Then you won't actually reach the higher frequency, the higher oscillations. You would get stuck. Even if the body is moving, people are going into the spasms, these releases, these kriyas, a lot of the energy would still be in a mental state, so that even if people are moving, they're still actually in their heads. So you raise it up only so much. So traditionally, an example of a song that would kind of hold that, for now, just imagine what are the more relaxing musical elements that you can hold that would signify this thing right here. Okay, so let me just clean this up. I kind of need to clear my brain. So the first would be satisfaction. This is dissatisfaction. This would be threshold. Threshold is pretty much, okay, I'm so sick of things that don't work for me, and I'm going to have to let go. So number 4 would be release. And then number 5 would be disintegration. And only then do you actually achieve what's called an awakening. Okay, the awakening would be the first time the energy would begin to rise up into what is called illumination. So in the video that I shared, this was in the shape of a U structure, where this would be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But because the human body doesn't operate in a simple down to up mechanism based on resistances that are held in the body, so that even as you allow electricity to rise up, magnetism would hold you down somehow. This is what the wave actually looks like in terms of the 12 stages. So number 7 would be illumination. Number 8 would be choice. And number 9 would be success and failure, which means that you can take people on a roller coaster to make their choices and actually realize that there's a lot of duality in what motivates us. So in the awakening, this is when we start to ask real questions about, am I happy? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I who I am right now? Illumination is where you get answers. So you would express this in various stimuli that would allow people to receive their feedbacks, their insights. And so they try to make choices. They try to embody and activate those insights from number 7. And number 9 is when they start to ride the elevator and go up and down on the things that would dualistically try to be chosen. That number 9 is almost like the washing machine that allows people to go into the last giving up process. Okay, so there's this second delta drop. There's four deltas here. There's this one. So this would be rather really slow wave music. This would be very slow wave music, somewhere between 5 and 6. Okay, and then this would be slow wave music. Okay, so satisfaction, and then disintegration and the dark night of the soul. And then when you end the process, okay, number 11 would be the unitive state. The mystic John of the Cross, or Juan de la Cruz, he was Spanish, many centuries ago, stated that the only way you can achieve oneness, the unitive state, the non-dual state, is by going through the dark night of the soul. And this is the state in which you try to take on sources of energy from the outside, and you're not getting it, and you are forced to derive the source from within. Like you are the source. You are like the sun, that you have to go within. You cannot rely on your addictions, external sources of energy. You have to go within. And so then you experience oneness after that. So the 12th stage would be reintegration. This is when you would take what you have blown apart in the disintegration process, which is number 5, and then you have to allow people to reintegrate, harvesting all of the insights that have probably come up in illumination, also in unitive state. So this is your design. You design a journey according to an emotional plan or an energetic blueprint, where to achieve, let's say, joy normally happens here. Pure joy happens here. After anger could be here. Some people experience anger here, or they could also experience it somewhere here when you raise things up again after disintegration. This doesn't have to be just illumination. This could be, okay, I need to be brave on the hero's journey. I need to find the courage. But often anger comes up somewhere in the middle of this. So you realize the contrasts between emotions can actually have a specific design in accordance to your understanding. When does forgiveness come? Forgiveness traditionally could happen somewhere here, release. If anger comes up here, forgiveness would come up here. But very often, if anger actually does come up here, like people feel safe to experience anger, usually here, forgiveness would take place in this following part of success and failure, until they just learn to totally give up all of their struggles, somewhere here. Fear, where does fear come in? Fear usually comes up here. It could also still come up here. It could also be here, and energy rises up. And the opposite of fear would be courage. So you can practice courage somewhere here. It doesn't usually come up here. Here is where you let people admit that you are afraid of dying. You are not able to confront all of the possibilities in the human range of experience. And if you're able to honestly, authentically activate that, so people aren't just hiding what they're afraid of, courage would naturally happen here. So in the beginning of Inner Dance, a lot of playlists actually held these slow. So this would have lasted maybe 3 to 5 minutes. And this would have lasted maybe all of these together would have lasted maybe 2 and 3 would have lasted 10 to 15 minutes. And this would have lasted maybe 5 minutes. And then this would have lasted, this isn't too long. This could be 3 minutes. This could be, if this is too long, people just fall asleep. So maybe, let's say 5 minutes. You can let them experience deep delta, where and you'd be surprised when you let the energy drop. This is actually when a lot of people cry. You probably have recognitions and memories of this. When you dropped the energy, this is when people experience release. So don't be strict with this. This is not separated. A lot of these overlap with each other. So even as they're in satisfaction already, when their heart starts to palpitate and pulse faster, they're still feeling relaxed, but then their bodies are already getting enervated. So when you do the delta drop for the first time, a lot of people would experience release then and there. So a lot of the music people use actually incorporates number 4 and 5 altogether, and number 2 and 3 could just be one long track that's 7 or 10 minutes long, that starts slow but builds up rather strongly. Yeah, so I think that's important to say. So yeah, if this lasts for 5 minutes, then all of this could be as long as maybe 30 minutes. And then this one could last as long as maybe 5 minutes, not too long, because this is accumulative 6, 7, 8, and 9. There's so many genres you can play here, so many emotions of anger, of regret, of all the stories of the human start to get condensed within the REM state, and you merely prepare them energetically here. There's not really too much human psychology here. You would just let the ego kind of drop here by just holding energetic patterns, but a lot of psychological features of the process traditionally are quite effective here in the 30 minutes, where the energy would rise and fall until people get tired of the story, looking at everything that they were storing in the story. Once they let go, then you can drop it here, where that could be 5 minutes long, and then you let them rise up into the heights of oneness, and this could last for 5 to 10 minutes. 15 minutes would be too long, and then you would end a process here, number 12. This could be maybe 5 minutes. Don't leave them in an active state. Don't let them get attached to what they're beginning to see in oneness. Let them let go again, so that they could embody, like, all of what has happened here in a non-attached way, not working on a high, but still working on not really a low, but space where they've reintegrated like all of the events, which could have been planetary or personal or kind of cosmic. Okay, so this is the first study element in inner dance. We have a strong proposal to the sciences on what inner dance brings about. So the 12 stages is inner dance specific, but the circadian wave, in accordance to the sleep cycle, is something belonging to the sciences. This is the strong proposal in inner dance is when we bring about circadian entrainment, meaning doesn't want to go away. When you entrain the body to go through these massive waves, these vibratory shifts, here's where transformation occurs. There's a lot of talk about brainwave entrainment, where you can expose people to isochronic tones or binaural beats, which is largely, to expose people to theta frequencies, or somewhere between delta theta, there seems to be changes. But in the work that we do, it seems like when you take people within a wide range of vibrations, to be able to embody everything between delta and gamma and more, transformation and healing occurs here, and that we can entrain a lifetime worth of rising and falling so that people's lives would change. And it's in accordance to this pattern that's written out inside the human body. So once you learn this, once you study this well, this is when you can start doing things. This is when you can start to create like shifts in the way the energy could be held. So what do I mean by that? Okay, you can take people through the 12 stages, but if what you're actually going for is the REM stage, going back to this particular model, understanding that the reason why we go to sleep is in fact to experience REM. Observe the chart. What do you see? What interests you here? Look at it long enough. What you would notice is that the deepest non-REM happens on hour number 1. Okay, you slept for an hour and you experience initially just this. Like it's somewhat a tiny bit longer here. They're longer here. Hour 6 towards 6.5 hours, and it's long here, longer here than here, but they're not as deep. Okay, they're just operating here. It's lighter and it's not as deep. So in the beginning of the sleep stages, you need a lot of slow waves in order to achieve REM. Okay. Now, what is interesting is REM is a lot longer here between this time and this time. The longest you will experience magic, healing, and transformation throughout the whole day will be somewhat in the last hour and a half before waking up, or sometime around, depending on what time you sleep. It could be between 2 to 3 o'clock a.m., 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so this is what you're going for. And what this says is it takes the average human 7 hours to achieve magic. Okay, so when you design a playlist, you're helping the human to access this a lot sooner and a lot longer, hopefully, while they're in the conscious state. Knowing that, understanding how this works, you can actually create systems that allow imagine, okay, this is what I need, this is what I want. You want to pull this closer to the to this part right here. Okay, let's say this is when you're doing the work, but it actually takes the human being so long to achieve this, when let's say all of these are taking place. Okay, if it takes so long to achieve that, how could you achieve that like sooner? So let's say maybe this could be REM. This is what we are trying to understand now. And for that reason, a lot of the playlist systems in the innerdance process shifted starting 5 years ago. A lot of practitioners who learned the system initially, this is still largely the system at work, but a lot of the playlists that are being used in innerdance now, maybe let's just start a new board, because I couldn't erase I couldn't erase what is on it. Okay, so REM might be taking place a lot earlier, and then delta might come later, or delta could be held even at the onset, so that the wave, let's just shade like a common area, the wave could hold something simultaneous and synchronic earlier, so that maybe there are tiny waves, non-REM like waves here, but then the sooner we can hold REM state, the longer delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma would be achieved. So that's why we're actually using a lot of these sleep playlist systems with doctors and parents on children, especially because a lot of children aren't experiencing REM stage sleep so much anymore because of their addictions to cell phones, to the internet, to certain kinds of food. In the modern sense, lifestyles have prevented long REM from happening. And one of the things that we are trying to work out is how people can re-achieve the healing that takes place here by conducting certain types of inner dance processes. To really understand this beyond these models, we would need to understand, it could be this simple, but these are hard to interpret if we don't know what the biological mechanisms are in relation to these neurological electric mechanisms do. So the first primary system, the system that is activated the most in inner dance is the dopaminergic system. Okay, don't run away from the word. It's simple enough to achieve a topic that we probably commonly hear all the time. Dopamine is the drug of choice in most of the type of Kundalini activation work and inner dance work traditionally. When you play music to people's bodies, dopamine is enhanced. Okay, when anything that has rhythm, anything that has tempo, if it's speedy enough, dopamine would rise up. And this is the pathway. So the ventral tegmental area sends out dopamine. Normally, when you're awake, dopamine is in charge of attention, and dopamine also in charge of body movement. The amygdala would be somewhere here. So that would be in charge of emotions, okay? And hippocampus would be memory. Okay, let's write that down to make it clear. Attention, body movement, which is motor function, and memory and emotion. Sorry for my handwriting. So what inner dance does is it reroutes this neurotransmitter that normally goes to the places where addiction is happening. Okay, addiction, aka reward. The dopamine is the main transmission agent that keeps us awake, keeps us focused, keeps our body moving, keeps us remembering the past, and keeps us like somewhat happy. Emotion, amygdala. So the first mechanism that we put out is the addiction cycle. Actually, we enhance the addiction drug, which goes into these centers, and that's when we feel the high. When do we feel the high? That's the question. To achieve the real high, dopamine actually needs to route to the striatum. Okay, so this is a part of the brain that experiences bliss. And when does that experience bliss? Let's go to this. So this is about rewards outcome. If you are expecting something, okay, it's so much about too much expectations doesn't actually lead to the bliss state. What does that mean? When you're expecting something, okay, and then you don't get what you expect, there's no reward. What happens to dopamine? Okay, and if you get the reward, what happens to dopamine? If you're expecting, okay, if you're expecting, anticipating, and then if you were not expecting a particular outcome, and then there was no reward, what would happen to dopamine? And then if you actually got what you were wanting, but you weren't expecting it, what would you get? Okay, so if you were expecting something but you didn't get it, then there would be dopamine depression. Dopamine count would go down. And then if you get what you want but you were actually expecting it, then there's actually no change. Not so much changes in the dopamine cycle. You don't experience bliss because you were expecting it anyway, and then when you get it, you know, it's kind of nice, but you don't really feel charged. You don't feel the bliss state. So when you're not expecting something and then you don't get the reward, then there's no change. And then when you're not expecting it and then you get it, this is actually when there is an activation of dopamine. Okay, why are we talking about this? Why is this important? It has something to do with this. When you choose certain vibrations, aka songs, and you learn to raise the energy up, when you drop it and people didn't expect, that's when certain neurotransmitters get released. And when you raise it up and then you keep dropping it through the law of contrast, the law of opposites that takes place in the energetic structure, going back to this particular model, the choice is whether, okay, do I pay attention? Do I move my body exactly as I'm used to moving? Do I keep remembering the past in a way that I'm in some kind of loop? And then am I attached to certain emotions that I am accustomed to or I'm attached to? Inner dance happens to here. Dopamine needs to be rerouted here. And the way to do that is by setting up a system where people are not able to attach themselves to certain outcomes. If people come into this space and, okay, this is what I want, this is what I need, they would be operating here, and dopamine will not be activated. Dopamine is the first neurotransmitter. It's not the only one. It cannot be the only one because dopamine is also the addiction drug. So one of the first mistakes a lot of facilitators make, not in the short term, in the medium term, this is relevant only if you hold the energy beyond, let's say, a few months or a year, years. When you get people used to the same songs, when you keep using the same music and people learn to anticipate, oh, okay, I'm gonna cry again here. I'm going to cry. I'm gonna surrender again here. Here comes that song that lets the energy rise up again, and then gives insights here. And then, you know, the more people anticipate, the same energies, you actually start to build new addictions. It could be spiritual addiction, but it's an addiction nonetheless. And later on, because the unpredictable became predictable, you actually would get stuck. You might get some results where people get the high from the dopamine rush that initially takes place in the first changes that happens in the autonomic nervous system. But the more you just keep doing that in some kind of loop, people would actually eventually experience some kind of depression because they keep getting the high and then they're not getting the reward anymore. That is how addiction works. When you keep going for the same drug, what happens is tolerance. You don't get the same hit anymore because the body needs to achieve homeostasis. And when you put in too much stimulants, for example, or uppers that you're ingesting into the body, the body would then coordinate this so that it prevents you from going too high. It would send out these neurotransmitters that would be depressants. So you don't go too high, go too low. That's how tolerance builds. So the more you keep going high, the more your body actually creates a lowering mechanism that prevents you from ruining your circadian rhythms, because the circadian rhythms does hold daily or like yearly homeostasis. Yearly is circannual, so that people aren't just going through the 24-hour cycle, they're going through the 12-month season cycle, so that in summer, this is where you are, and in winter, this is where you are, and then in spring, this is where you are, you know? Maybe this is autumn. This is not just a day, it's actually a year for those who are in temperate zones on the planet. So going back to dopamine, dopamine is the first thing that's normally talked about, and it's rather useful to bring up. It's rather useful to bring up. So based on the law of contrast, when you make very quick changes in the music, what you achieve is the rerouting of dopamine from the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the nucleus accumbens, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. As you notice, there are only 4 plus 1 receptors for dopamine, and that would be significant later. We'll talk about that. Your job is to reroute it into the striatum. The striatum is what gets activated when something unexpected happens and people get what they deserve. Gateway mechanisms open up in the brain. That's called latent inhibition, that allows networks to spread activation throughout the whole brain. And when it's not happening, when people are only in expectation of reward, they're sending dopamine to just these very specific centers, and a global spread is not happening. So what's interesting with dopamine is that when we're constantly here in wanting to control and predict life, what takes place is not only do we depress dopamine, we actually inhibit a lot of the other neurotransmitters that could be playing out in the human experience. So this is the serotonin pathway. And what's interesting about the serotonin pathways is if dopamine has only 4 or 5 receptors, there are 15 receptors for serotonin. So dopamine is the addiction. It would probably be called the addiction pathway. And serotonin would be more of the happiness. So a lot of people think that dopamine leads to happiness. It does not. If you merely bring people into addictive states in the energetic activation, serotonin, too much dopamine actually inhibits serotonin. So the more you're activating this, merely the dopaminergic cycle, the serotonin pathways don't open up, and you inhibit the receptors in a way that people don't. They can experience the high, but they're not going here. They're not achieving joy. Um, so let's compare the difference. Okay, so this would be pleasure seeking, reward seeking. Um, only has 5 receptors. It fuels desire, motivation, anticipation. Dopamine is addictive, short term. It's felt in the body. Okay, it's physicalized, and it inspires taking. People get greedy and want more and more and more, um, more and more and more, and then too much leads to this. So it's interesting that when you activate this too much, you're actually inhibiting this. So this goes back to why, based in design, you would want to achieve N3, and then you would want to end with the 12th stage, which leads to the reintegration process. If you're not doing this carefully enough, at least in representation, what happens is you're not able to represent the serotonin pathways. The serotonin as a neurotransmitter is not addictive. It achieves long-term joy. Maybe you're not happy, but if you're joyful, this is something that doesn't go away. It's not just felt in the body, it's felt above the neck. It inspires generosity. If you see people being competitive, even in terms of the energy work, you know that this is what is being activated. But if you can see that people are generous and are giving, this is what you are activating. If you're one of those, then good for you. And once you get it, you don't have to keep coming back. Say, okay, I'm good. I'm good right now. I'm okay. I'm happy. Um, what does this mean? Too little leads to depression. In the 90s in the Philippines, a lot of people were taking too much ecstasy pills. And what ecstasy does is it sends out a lot of serotonin. It disinhibits serotonin. And when people use up all of their serotonin, a lot of ecstasy pill users actually experience long-term depression because they could not catch up with the serotonin count. They were so happy when they were releasing serotonin artificially. So when they ran out, I knew so many people who experienced deep depression. So this is what we're balancing out. When you design an energetic space to hold, these normally combat each other. I don't think they need to. It is actually possible to experience both, but it takes observation. And if you're not familiar with how this works in relation to how this works, then maybe you can bring people here. You can get people high. I need to keep changing color. Maybe you're good at getting people high, but where the space come through, which often needs to come about from a long journey, but maybe certain journeys don't even need to have these huge spikes. Maybe people need to rest at many points, so the energy could maybe look more like that, but that is achievable usually by the more active rising and falling that does lead to the eventual inner peace that comes about from outer dancing, outer movement, outer activations, and so on and so forth. So the dopamine versus serotonin conversation is just one of the many conversations we could go into. I don't want to go into the other neurotransmitters and hormones so much, like oxytocin pathways, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, endorphins, testosterone. There's more, but these are usually, these two could be significantly the first stages. It's enough for us to talk about how this truly happens. Um, we want to understand, like, how does the dream work vibrationally and chemically, because you are altering the chemical balance inside you and inside others, and you want to learn, how can I achieve this without too much chaos all the time, because this is achievable through chaos. REM state holds chaos, and when you're awake, you might be in a lot of order, but there is suffering in that order because it takes a lot of energy to hold beta state problem solving, analytical, logical consciousness. The chaos does hold a lot of order, but you do want to bring some level of organization to that. So to understand that, we would bring up the role of these neurotransmitters. Okay, what happens to certain neurotransmitters that allow you to go into the dream, and then the question is why. Like, what is the point? Why am I going to the chaos, or why am I even going into too much problem solving, too much analysis, over planning? What's the point of like bouncing around from here to here? Is that the whole point of living life? And what does it mean to achieve this while being in that, maybe, or even being in this as well, like simultaneously? What would be the kind of mind or body that's able to do that? So when you first go into sleep, serotonin, seemingly a really important and beautiful and useful and amazing thing. Okay, there are all of these pathways that serotonin goes into. This is highly active when we're awake, actually. We're not receiving serotonin on one part of the day. And when is that? Okay, it's actually in REM. You're not experiencing serotonin reception during the REM state. So neuroscientists right now are asking, like, why don't we why don't we achieve possible happy states while we are in REM? Okay, good question. The other neurotransmitter that is depressed when we are in the REM stages is also noradrenaline. Okay, noradrenaline is the adrenaline system of the brain. Adrenaline takes place in the solar plexus. So when you're activating the yellow chakra, a lot of healers, they like to keep poking the yellow chakra. What they're trying to achieve is the release of epinephrine or adrenaline, which is sympathetic innervation. It's the fight or flight system. It does bring about power and courage, but there are other neurotransmitters as well. It's not just that. So noradrenaline and serotonin goes down both during the sleep stages called REM. So when you dream, you can't have this. But the question is why? What do they do? So noradrenaline, for one, coordinates attention span. It coordinates, okay, I need to focus. And in the brain, you need to send energies to the prefrontal cortex so you could do your planning really well. Serotonin, it isn't just like a happiness drug. It's an emotional drug. Okay, so as you can see from this chart, serotonin is a very social, it's a social chemical. Dopamine is not. It's something that you normally experience alone. Serotonin is, to achieve happiness, you normally experience it through a social system, a social structure. And emotionally, it allows you to make connections, not just with people, but also with different neuronal regions. So in many ways, serotonin is also actually responsible for emotional attachment. And emotional attachment also leads to cognitive or mental attachment. Now the question is, when you are in the dream state, is that something that you need? Okay, do you need attachment here, here, here? What is the point? Do you stay attached, whether you need it or not? Let's say, do you stay attached when you are in the dream state? The answer could be yes or no, depending on some of your memories of the dream. But all you have to do is to look at, let's say, the way you network information in your mind. Okay, this is an example of a semantic network which undergoes priming methodology. So if I mention the word red, maybe in your mind you'd make certain associations that have something to do with that color. So you might think of other colors, or you might think about this that's kind of associated with that color, or you might think of this, or you might think of this, all of which have to do with this one. And then as soon as you think about this, this is associational with this and this. Or if you go this path, you might go to this, or you might go here. Or if you start thinking about that, then you might go there. Next thing you know, you end up there. And there is so far away from here. So when you are in beta state, when you are here, all right, when you're here, in your mind, you can't really go far distances in terms of the network. When you're being logical, when you're being, you're in your corporate environment, or you're a mom taking care of the kids, you can't really move from here to here. It's not convenient. You need to make direct associations based on the ongoing topic, the ongoing issue. If there's a problem, you need close associations. So maybe here, you can only go this far. You can't go too far. And interestingly, both dopamine and serotonin achieves that here, like emotionally, and here partly, yeah, emotionally, through pleasure, but dopamine is also responsible for control. It's a mechanism that we have created in order for us to maintain focus, maintain attention, maintain order. And then when we can let go and don't need that so much, then we can go into this. So when we are awake, a lot of these mechanisms are required to achieve and hold this in constancy. So that when we looked at the dopamine system, dopamine is still being expressed through the ventral tegmental area, but it needs to be rerouted when we go into the dream state. So that's one way of looking at it. When we go into a space of non-expectation, that for one allows us to go nearer a dream state. What is more interesting is, if dopamine is still being expressed in the REM stages, why is serotonin taken away? Why is serotonin depressed? This is the reason. Why does it have to go down? This is the reason. In the first stages of sleep, you're still experiencing some serotonin release here, and somewhat a little bit here. There's still serotonin release here, even in the innerdance states. A lot of this expression is similar, but it's totally gone here. And the reason for that is when you're in the REM state, you can't just make strong associations in the semantic network. When you dream, what happens is your mind is able to connect with associations that are far away from the initial stimuli. So street could go to, I don't know, it could connect to like Santa Claus. Oh, and then it could connect to like a flower or a goat, or then like poop, and then it would go to baby. So in the dream, there are these connections that are so not connected that start to interconnect, very similar to like the inner dance experience. So for this would help you to understand this in a way. Okay, you can hold emotions here, you can hold anger, you can hold letting go, but if you allow people to stay attached to a particular emotion, this is why there are so many waves here. If you allow someone, okay, someone's crying, they're in sadness, they're grieving over their long lost grandmother, and or dad or mom, and they're saying goodbye, and it's taking a long time, it's taking a while, they keep crying, maybe it's not even related to a specific life event, they're just crying, crying, crying. And sometimes crying even goes wilder than crying, it goes into all kinds of release. What you do is you need to create switches in the system. You need to switch from number 6 to 7 to 8, or sometimes you move from 6 to 8, 8, 8 to 10, to allow what they're looking at to be seen like in a different way. And this basically allows the serotonergic pathway not to take hold too much. Because if this is something that actually is depressed in the dream state, because people are still awake even though they're experiencing REM, there is a difference between REM wake and REM sleep. Um, Associations people make in REM that is very nonlinear, nonlinear. It's very strange. The associations are weak in the sense that people can experience people experience creativity. They see solutions to problems that they cannot when they are here in this stage, before they go down. They're not as creative when they're awake, because associations in semantic networks are undergoing what's called priming direct priming modes, meaning the associations are very close to each other and they're very, very strong. So what happens in the dream is strong connections are decreased, and then longer connections that are far away are held and made possible, and through all directions, through many, many directions. Red isn't just red anymore. Red becomes interconnected with all possible other concepts, creating like a universe or universality of all the things that are seen. Everything is actually one. There's no separation. Nothing is separate in the dream state. So if you know some of these mechanisms that do already take place at night, that depresses noradrenaline and serotonin, what happens in the design of the inner dance or kundalini experience, if there's too much of emotion, if there's too much of anticipation, and we just talked about two, okay, we didn't talk about cortisol, which is responsible for stress, didn't talk about oxytocin, we didn't talk about endorphins, testosterone, just talking about serotonin and dopamine. If you're not careful with the switches, you would still hold a lot of the addictive mechanisms that does take place in wakeful REM if in the semantic network associations are still being held rather strongly. So what you want to do is, and I'm not, I'm not creating judgments. I've made these I've done a lot of these mechanisms that I'm warning you about, so that it took me a long time to learn how not to just keep people repeating the same stories or enhancing existing stories so that they actually come into greater attachment. If you don't know how these kind of work, you actually will enhance or elevate ego. You could inflate ego and fear if the dream state isn't accessed effectively. If what you're doing is in fact bringing people into greater expressions of N2 and N1. So what you need is a diversity. What you need is a huge range of the human experience that becomes accessible to people. So let's say if a life journey takes place in 50 years or 80 years, if a journey of a universe takes place in billions of years, how do you express that in a diversity of sound and vibration? And you can't remove concepts. You can't just say, okay, we're going to get rid of the mind right now. In the dream state, there's actually more conceptualization. It's just that the conceptualization is going way, way beyond what people are used to. And that is the reason why we go into the magical state, the magical realm, which is missing in the human when we're kind of too much here. So, okay, let me look at the slides. I think I've spoken a lot or enough. I've actually, I noticed I've been speaking for 2 hours, and though this is interesting for you, I don't want to overwhelm you with more and more, because already this is kind of hard to process. What I'm sharing with you isn't just facilitation tools. Facilitators could use this. They don't have to. They can discover this on their own. I'm sharing these based on real world applications. If you want to apply this in schools and hospitals, into economics or family structures, these would be useful. But the most use would be if you are going to be conducting trainings or more than whatever is more than the workshop or the session. If you're going to be teaching people, if you're going to be informing people, you would be interested in this in the long term. And then the more you keep practicing this, not just like receiving it, but like talking about it, sharing it with others, it would help you to answer some of the hard questions that come up that receive a lot of generalizations. Like a generalization would be in many trainings, people often say, okay, someone's not moving, something's wrong, you're blocked. If you're not moving, then you're blocked. That's not true. There are other mechanisms beyond movement that are in fact more beneficial than movement. So if you know how to observe the wave, you actually will achieve a level of control that in fact is coming from letting go of control. You would be able to notice the nuances, that you could refine the energy you hold. So when up goes up, it doesn't just mean up, it means something in relationality to other ups and downs. I want to open the space to see if there are questions or insights, ideas, feelings that helps you, or maybe there's something that needs to be unraveled more, and then we can go from there. So just if you feel like contributing that now, then yeah, just unmute yourself. What do you think? What do you feel? Do you have any questions or ideas? Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
hi, Pai. Um,
Hey Sam.
Yeah, I would like to ask the womb sounds, the whale sounds, which I don't know, are they like delta or theta, like very yeah low frequencies, if I'm not wrong, or anyway, yeah, where would you place them in a playlist in the
Mm,
12 stages?
okay, good. Really good question. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So, when you use noise, okay, I'm getting you. When you use noise, like a lot of songs, they have a structure. They do rise up gradually, and then maybe they fall, and maybe they look like this. That's a song. They say that's a song. So when you listen to the womb room, it doesn't sound like a song, or the whale song. It doesn't sound like a song. It rises a little bit and it falls a little bit, but there's this deep delta that holds the structure underneath. So why is that? What's the point in that? What makes this a good question is in regards to maybe this. Okay, no, this is not a good. That's a certain kind of EEG. Okay, this looks a certain way, but based on some other EGs, okay, this is the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, because what your question is about waves. So let's say delta would appear in some EEG forms like this. Some EEGs measure the eyelids, some measure, put electrodes in the brain, some would measure muscle contractions. Theta might be less gentle. Yeah, these are just in representation. They're probably a lot more complex than this. It'd be beta would look like this. Now, the height would be the amplitude. Okay, the frequency would be the number of waves that takes place. Let's say in a second. Um, so the frequency and delta would be less, and the amplitude would also be less. Now, when you look at gamma, what you would get is lower amplitude but more frequency. So what is interesting about this is that the slower you go, the slower states actually hide the faster states. So when you go somewhere in the middle, amplitude is high, frequency is somewhere in the middle, and they're more noticeable. This is more visual. There's more organization, there's more kind of elegance. This seems more like everything's in it, and then there's chaos, and then this looks like there's nothing. But actually, mysteriously, delta actually is gamma, like underneath, because delta doesn't really exist. When you look at waveforms, um like this is not accurate. um Okay, these are waveforms. Yeah, this is accurate. This would be a sine wave, square wave, and this is a triangle wave, and this is a sawtooth wave. So these waves you'd see in music and you'd see it in the brain. How do you make a triangle wave? You actually need to combine two or more sine waves together. This is like the perfect wave. So when you hear a perfect tone, that to be a sine wave. And when you combine two tones together, this is what you would achieve. You put more tones together, you'd come up with something like this, and then this. Now, in truth, this does not exist in nature. In a way that sound is interpretable by the auditory cortex. So this is simulated. This is artificial. This is something we create through synthesizers. So if you have these tools and you're using them in the workshop, you can try to simulate a sine wave, but this is not naturally occurring in the brain. The brain is basically filled more with this and this and this and this. This is not also this is more rarely occurring, right? So to achieve highest brain states, you actually need the slower waves. So when we started to study um like some of these other structures that isn't musical by nature. When you think of music, most human ears can recognize a range of tempo that's somewhere in between maybe this to this in terms of BPM. So if you do play music, if you go lower than 40, let's say 38 to let's say 20, people don't notice the difference anymore. It may as well be 10 or 5 or 1. And then when you go above 140, let's say, okay, I go to 180 or 240 or even 500, the human range, it, based on the human range, the human ear doesn't really recognize. It's just fast. So when you keep going faster and faster, when you go beyond what human music is used to, let's say you have a tempo, you can alter the tempo in a DJ app or in another tool that you choose. Say you have an actual synthesizer with you. When you go beyond that, you can achieve these states. But so the techniques in inner dance usually in the past would be to jump from between delta to effects of something like beta. Now when you jump from slow to fast or faster, even small differences like jumping from here to here, the difference would mean a lot, you know. The small things make the difference, in other words. So let's say you jump from about 50 or 60, that would still be considered here BPM to 110. That would be a huge jump. But if you jump from 50 to maybe 70, that would still be huge for the heartbeat when it's making adjustments in the autonomic nervous system. You know, that could still signify fear and anxiety when you raise it up. So it's up to you how long you want to hold that. Say, okay, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, they're pulsating on a specific frequency. And when you increase that, that would raise the vibration, that would make the heartbeat and the breath rate go faster. So when you drop this to from maybe 110 to maybe about even just 90, the heart would radically slow down already. So even if you're not playing slow music because it's slower, delta isn't a literal delta, it's just the effect. So people might go into delta state just by you going even a little bit slower. So traditionally, that's how facilitators used to do it, and that's how they're still doing it now, maybe in a lot of styles. Going from slow to fast and then fast to slow achieves possibly gamma states and delta states just through contrast. That's how literally from a neurological basis people enter into non-duality. So experiments like the whale song in the womb room, what we did was to hold this alongside this all throughout the whole thing. And when we did that, the experiences that people reported was pretty much many people didn't have to go through this or this or this, you know, because there is so much of this already imbued with the like the higher frequencies, higher, faster. People were just here all along. The womb is literal and symbolic. Okay. What did the world look like when you were in the womb? Imagine that. Like, were you conscious when you were in your mother's belly, or were you just passing out like all the time? Talking about the dream, that's very, very figurative. When you are in the womb, you are basically sleeping all the time. Yeah. But that's not exactly true. Maybe in the womb. Okay, I'm not a great artist, so I'm just gonna pretend that I can make a baby. Okay, I really can't draw. Um, okay, so you're there, and okay. Um, maybe in the first month or second month in the womb, you're asleep maybe 80%, 70% of the time. The question is, when do you dream the most in your whole life? All right. During the last week in your mom's belly, if you came out normal, you would have been sleeping maybe 90 to 95% of the time. Right now, you're sleeping only 1/3 of the day. Okay, roughly 30% of the day you're wasting in la la land. And when you sleep as an adult, you're only dreaming 15% of the time. So the time spent on magic, on healing and dream is so small. It's 15% of 1/3. I'm not good at math. You can do the computations later. But when you're in the womb, you're sleeping maybe 70 or 80% of the time. In the last week in the womb, you're sleeping 95% of the time. And 95% of the time, you are dreaming 95% of the time. So one of the most interesting, there are many movements people make in inner dance, but one of the things I'm fascinated by is like when they start to do this, it's like they're floating. And then when you ask them questions later, like they say, okay, I was in the womb. So there's something about the dream state. I believe that the dream state is us going into a dimensionality where we're all actually together. We're one. When you study the near death experience, when people die and then they live to come back to say what happened, there's like this interesting other thing that happens, and it's called the birth vision. It's the opposite of the life review. The life review is when you see your whole life flash before your eyes. The birth vision is you see Samantha before she became Samantha. There's this precognition. It's like you're dreaming yourself into being. And I don't think that just happens in the womb. I think every time we go to sleep, we're dreaming ourselves into being. I like to think that when we sleep, we're having coffee with God and the goddess, and like, okay, what happened to you today, and what could have you done? You look at it in a non-linear way, and then you wake up again and you forget this other part of you that was God and goddess, and then you go make your experimentations again. So it's really quite interesting that this was the most intense when we were in the womb still. So when you study brains, the animal that has the highest brain capacity, much, much more than humans, are dolphins. And dolphins, unlike humans, they're not in non they're not in not in REM. They're about the 24 hours. They're always dreaming. They're always dreaming. So if you increase your brain capacity, you don't lose dream. So dolphins don't actually sleep. They rest one half of the brain and then the other is awake. They're always awake. They don't need to sleep anymore because they're perpetually in the magical space. So they use this echolocation, this sonar that allows them to sound out throughout the whole ocean. We're using the same sound elements to achieve this brain state. So we evoke the womb room to bring us back into what did we look like and what did it look like from us. That's like an interesting question. What did it look like before we came here, and then after we leave, what would it look like? Time and space and dimensionality in the womb is like an inception from that Christopher Nolan movie. It's like an interstellar, where in the birth vision process, we're actually dreaming things into being. What is the birth vision? The birth vision is the highest potential a human could achieve through all conditions of possibility that are given to you. So we think life is linear and you live it from day one to day 1,000, 10,000 something. And then there's an end. In the birth vision space, they all coexist, all these possibilities, so that when you achieve a REM state, you realize the past is not linear. What I thought happened is actually only one possibility in a network of vastness. And the thing that happens tomorrow isn't just an actualization of a potential. There are many possible futures. So when people go into the REM state, they get in trouble. They're given these antidepressants, antipsychotics, because they're not living one line. So what we're trying to do is to achieve this without going crazy, but still having a little bit of insanity that's able to access the semantic network associatively through many directions. So yeah, like the womb room, the whale song, we realized that we don't need to always go through the same structure. The dark night of the soul is happening at the same time as the awakening and illumination. We're always satisfied, we're always in threshold, we're always not happy, we're happy. When you realize modern spiritual people are experiencing all the stages as one anyway, then we don't need to go into sequence because we're already bored with one at a time. There are advanced souls like you and me and us, all of us here, that deserve, like, yeah, what do you think? Mm,
Yeah, thank you. On Friday, I've been facilitating a session, and I was really curious to know how to locate them. And
mm,
I just placed the boom sounds like in the beginning, just after the first song, which is like this giving
mm,
this safe
mm,
and welcome,
mm,
and then a lullaby, and then the boom
mm,
sounds. So kind of
mm,
like, yeah,
mm,
it's
mm,
been accompanied somehow. And I really notice also when there are the whales that really people kind of
mm,
shift
mm,
completely somewhere else. Like the
mm,
whales is so
mm, mm.
very magic. Thank you, Padre.
Yeah, I think what's useful about what Sam shared is you need to read the space. You need to listen to the room. You need to understand where are the people at. You know, our people are they are they releasing? Are they stuck? Are they rigid? Are they in their heads? Are they, or have they been in this for a long time? So how do you speak to that vibrationally? You need to also be situational about it. But the womb as a concept is something that has traction no matter where we go in the world. When we ask questions about the womb, because we all share that, it would never grow old. So I think in a paradigm shift, we're really just redefining what consciousness looked like in the beginning, and we think it's blank, but based on what we're learning now, it wasn't blank, it was full. Like we knew a lot more in the origins than we know now. We had to forget a lot of what we knew, and the brain is partly shaped by the information that we carry that was given to us. So we're not just progressing paradigmatically, we're also kind of regressing into the original brain state. And the REM becomes a lineage, it becomes a heritage, it's ancestral. It was an original brain state that we had all when we were in, like when we were the fetus. Thank you. Anything else? What else do we? What else would be interesting? What is opened up and evoked? Auntie, you unmuted?
Yeah, I could ask. There was a discussion about the addiction also earlier and the dopamine, but now that the serotonin came up and there was this notion of like lack of serotonin being related to depression, is that also something like depression that the inner dance has been helping? And if yes, are there some effects or something to take into account maybe in the music choices if wanting to like help specifically an audience with that, like for example, choosing of music or what stages to emphasis or make longer or anything like that?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, you can go. This could help us go deep. Let's go back to this one. I think one way of looking at the 12 stages is the fact that People are actually depressed, but they're not acknowledging it. Like depression is in non-REM 3. Like when you wake up, I don't know if any of you had the experience, but it's universally reported. When you wake up and you cannot move, you are paralyzed. Everything is black, and there's this feeling of like I'm going to die. I can't move. That's actually when you woke up in N3. So when people wake up and they're dreaming, it's quite vibrant. They get all these amazing ideas. So what people like Einstein and Salvador Dali would do is when they're working on a problem, when Einstein was trying to look for this and he couldn't find it, what he would do is he would hold a fork. Okay, he would hold a fork. Such a bad artist. This does not look like a fork. He'd hold a fork and then he'd put a plate there, and then he would hold the fork with his hand and he sits in a soft couch. And then what would happen is when he falls asleep, the fork would drop. And he's hoping that he would have entered like a creative phase by then. And when this drops and he wakes up, he comes up with these ideas that would eventually change the world. Dali would do the same. He would try to fall asleep and then he would let this fall. So when he wakes up, he'd have these good ideas. But based on what the circadian rhythms is telling us, we can only really achieve that here. So depression is in fact an existential ontological being that exists inside every human body. And when people aren't acknowledging depression, they can't reach this. They can't reach wholeness, totality, like completion. So depression is something you need to inbuild into the experience. And the depressant chemical is acetylcholine, for example. Acetylcholine is something that inactivates the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, it slows down the heartbeat. It slows down the heart rate. It slows down the thinking process so that we could go into deep delta. So depression, delta is a necessity. And when people don't allow themselves to be sad or to be slow down, another D word is we have to go through a daily death for us to come to life. So based on your question, depression is universalized in the inner dance process. So whether in like the womb room type thing, and the womb room is actually quite huge in Finland, where you're from. In the womb room, the playlist is primarily awashed with delta, actually, which allows for like these tiny waves to come out, and that's called white noise. That's what a baby hears, like white noise, which is a combination of all sounds, all harmonic, inharmonic, overtones, undertones, from a wide range. This is manageable through delta. The only way we can usually achieve that as adults is to experience these big waves. So when you hold sessions, you need to, delta opens the space. Delta opens the space. The parasympathetic nervous system slows down. Yeah, let's look at that. The BS, the parasympathetic nervous system slows down the heartbeat. It allows for digestion to happen. It needs to contract the bladder because you can't pee while you're sleeping. But yeah, those are the major ones. So this is what happens when you are depressed. Your heartbeat slows down. Your breath becomes shallow. Okay. You deepen the breath here. Sympathetic system, but the heart rate goes faster. So this is the opposite of depression, What this is saying is, okay, what's useful in the facilitation work, at least how we can translate this, is in the beginning, what you do is you open. And then when you let it rise, what you learn are techniques for constriction or contraction, and that those are called trigger mechanisms. You can use music, you can use your hands, you can use any device that allows people to be afraid without being scared. And that allows people to enjoy faster heartbeats that are normally not allowable, because we're fear avoidant, but actually pure joy stimulates like very fast heartbeats, and very fast brain waves. So you create trigger mechanisms while you are also relaxing. I think we did talk about this in the previous Zoom call. So when you make your triggers smaller, tinier, more sensitized, more refined, that's very different from when the triggers are kind of big, when facilitators are attached for participants to have big experiences of crying and screaming. When you become more refined, your triggers become more subtle. And that's what people are experimenting with globally. So if you hold like a deeper space, and you're actually holding more depression, more depressant, but you're not calling it depressant. It's like the ability to stare this in the eye, and when people are not scared of this, they can really live. So they're not so just in motivational frequencies anymore. They're not so addicted anymore. They'd be experiencing very high vibration, which isn't so intense. Like this is actually intense, because there's still a lot of attachment and motivation stuck here. But when people have been through the dark night, which means they lived lifetimes upon lifetimes, they tend to hold more refined energies here. And a lot of that is held by depressant chemicals, which is to say, okay, when you start to try to make the energy rise, we know epinephrine. Most people know this by adrenaline. Adrenaline is what you need when there's danger, when there is a threat, and this is what is transmitted here. That's what's activated here. But to make this go down, you need the corresponding depressant chemical. So what you're training the body to do is this. People are normally used when they want to go high, they go for this, and then when they need to slow down, they go for this. The dream state is actually a co-activation of there's still epinephrine actually expressing here, but it's mixed up with cortisol. Cortisol is usually known as the stress hormone, but when you mix cortisol with dopamine and this and all the other chemicals, you enter the dream state. When you're awake, you're either wanting to go up. Okay, so I need adrenaline, which is epinephrine, and then I can wind down later. I'm going to drink a lot of coffee in the morning, and that would allow epinephrine to rise. And then when I'm so tired because I'm done with the work, I'm done with the marketing presentation and this taking care of the kids, then I can wind down. I can sit on the couch and go into my depression. So I'll send this out. But what is wrong in many lifestyles today, including where you are, which is Helsinki, a lot of people are overly caffeinated nowadays. That's why they drink a lot of alcohol in the evenings, because they're too much here. So they're actually lacking depression. They're lacking this. So when people have vacations in places like Finland, it would be like the winter time, because people know that, okay, it's not summer anymore. The sun is down most of the time. Then that's when the body annually releases more of this. So people would go through what's called slow wave sleep. So the body's coping mechanism, either on a daily or yearly basis, is this long N3 that allows digestion to happen. But what's happening in the world now is even when it's winter time or nighttime, people are still kind of up because there's so much stress hormones, especially in the body, and there's so much leftover adrenaline in the blood. When we can't, so what's actually missing, honestly, is depression, the energy of death, the energy of slowness. Slow wave sleep is missing. And if you want people to heal from a cancer or hypertension, what you want to do is give them this. You want to give them more delta state because they're missing this wave, which means they're missing this wave. They're experiencing too much of this. So the reason why a lot of people are depressed is in fact because their body's healing. If you try to take away the depression, it's almost like you're saying, okay, you need to be active, you need to be a go-getter, but this is not natural. This is just an ultra modern Hollywood action suspense thriller concept that wasn't so 300, 400, 500 years ago when things were slow, right? So put it in, incorporate depression as part of the experience. As we are illuminating here, are clarifying here, make sure that you have the drops, the delta drops, like here, and here, then here. Okay, make it go low, make it go low, make it go low, make it go low. And sometimes there are small lows, like in some places. So sometimes this can be even looking like this. When you are working with more advanced participants, the more waves, the better. But if it's a new process for a lot of beginner people, this range here could be just this, or just two. But if people have gone through so much, if you want them to go into the non-dual state that leads them into the unitive, let them get tired of all this choosing. Do I like this? Do I not like that? Making preferences. So many small depressions amidst many small highs. But I guess if you're especially dealing with people in addiction, you would design the process. There are people who are addicted more to uppers. Like what's your drug? Are you more up? Are you speedy, or are you more? There are people who have a hard time getting their epinephrine and dopamine levels up. So the way you design your playlist would be to allow opportunities where that could internally rise. And a lot of people, there are differences as well. There are a lot of people who take a lot of uppers. That could be nicotine, not just methamphetamine or cocaine. That could be cigarettes. That could be coffee. When they're artificially raising the heartbeat through those psychotropic substances, something we need to teach people is how to raise energy levels internally without dependency on these drugs. And some foods are drugs, some things we drink are drugs. So then that would generate energy from inside rather than them having to pay a lot of money to keep like ingesting a lot of that. Persino, alcohol is the most common depressant. It slows down brain waves and the heartbeat, and it makes the breath shallow. So what's interesting is when you actually combine uppers and downers, stimulants and depressants, you go into a psychedelic state. If you drink enough coffee and wine at the same time, you go innerdancean people, because that's really what REM state is when you're receiving the chemicals that make the heart go that, and then something slows down at the same time. Good question too. Okay, is that good, Auntie?
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Okay. 20, 30 more minutes if there are lingering questions. These are important topics. This is the main, this is the fulcrum of what we discussed today. So a lot of your decisions would be based upon what was presented today. So if there are still other things you'd like to wonder about, now is the time.
Hi, bye. Do you hear me?
Yes. Hi, George.
Hi, hi, bye. Actually, I have a question. You said that when we open the space with delta waves, which makes sense, and the first wave concave, it goes like between alpha and gamma state, right? But you said actually it will be better on the range of alpha state at the beginning, and then you make it like to gamma state. Which one is better? And is there is any difference between the alpha if I go to alpha or gamma, and what it's good for?
Yeah. Where do you live? I want to situate the
In
answer.
Holland,
Ah,
in
okay.
the Netherlands.
Nice. Okay. That says a lot already. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot going on in Holland at the moment. And so this is just what I'm aware of. Let's start a new chart because it's messy and I can't erase some things. So let's draw out the actual innerdance wave. So yeah, in the beginning, maybe it would be more realistically like this. Okay, if this was maybe the level of music on a hertz or BPM level, and then maybe you can go higher, and maybe it go higher like this, and then maybe like that. All right. So in the beginning, you can only go so high. If you try to go higher, people are normally not ready, and there's no point because this is what you're preempting only. This is what you're preparing for. So based on choice, some facilitators even would just go like this. It's not really about the music per se. How you hold the words, the context, the space would determine how high or low people go. It's really about the effect. Some people would hold this, but because they hold huge context, people might already go like that. Some people, they'd hold music that's just like this, but the experience is actually that. So what we're doing now is we're modeling. So in the beginning, you want to just preempt so that this could happen, so that could happen. This is the deep surrender that allows this. So don't forget this. Raise it just enough. This could be, I don't know, 7, 10 minutes total. So that you could have more of this. If you spend too much trying to raise the energy too quick, you would lose this. So what you okay, this is actually quite important. So I want to thank you for bringing this up. So last week we talked about the autonomic nervous system, which is when the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system go into rising and falling. So what is important is what is this middle point? Okay, there has to be some kind of switch. So looking at this model, if you take too long in terms of holding the present energies, okay, maybe much slower, let's say like that, and then maybe this is 5 minutes to 7 minutes to 10 minutes, and you take too long to let it rise, what happens is you spread out the depressant energies too much, and you don't give a chance for the rising up to happen, which is here, and you lose your chance. So there has to be a switch. The switch is basically a conglomeration of fear and trust. Okay, this is when you open the space. Okay, you're safe. Anything can happen, and you are able to go into the unknown. But you're also acknowledging you're here to deconstruct some things that you don't need anymore. So fear arises here, but that can only truly happen if people trust. So when stimulants and depressants, okay, epinephrine, acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, cortisol, when all of these intermix, that creates like a cocktail, the masculine and the feminine. That creates a cocktail that leads to psychedelic realms, which is this one. So when you take too long in sending out, when you're taking too long to open, and you're sending out too many depressant energies, you will lose the chance to awaken fear, which is actually the energy that translates later to power and then to insight. Okay. So you need to be strategic. Okay, maybe 3 minutes is enough for many spaces. In Holland, where people experience this a lot, it's like the capital for the REM state, understanding the substances that have been more allowable there than most countries in the world. People are generally open already. So if they're open already and they're ready for activation, 3 to 5 minutes is enough. If you feel like even 2 minutes is enough, start to raise the energy sooner. It doesn't have to be too much. It depends on your style. Everyone's got a style. If you're overly excited, then do that. And I suggest don't do that. But what I'm trying to tell you, George, is I don't have preference. Some people can do that. That's entirely fine. Some people can do that. What's important is the effect. Now, in the first wave, this normally is not too high, but some people are already going there. What you want to do is you want them to pace. You don't want them to achieve. Why would you want them to achieve this in the first 2 minutes? When in fact, to balance delta all the way to gamma here would hold a range. Why would you want them to do that? You want them to enjoy the process. This is space. This is time. So you want them to go into a sequence as much as possible, which is the traditional inner dance. We don't do it so much now only because we're dealing with people who are so in REM state already. But a lot of you will deal with very new people. Open the space. So decide how long that would be, and then make the switch, which is when the sympathetic and the parasympathetic starts to intermix. People feel this, like you're laying down, your eyes are closed, and then you start to feel you're relaxed, but the heart starts to palpitate, and people feel anxious, but they can't fight. So you're using the music and other elements to kind of awaken the heartbeat, and then their bodies start to do this, or their heart beats faster. That's when the switch is happening. Just enough. Just create the first switch and then drop it. This would help you so that anyone in the space who's still not there can catch up. We like to say no soldier will be left behind. So even though there's some people who are already kind of in the cosmos or screaming their faces off, there's some people who are in their heads. So going into N3, maybe in the 8-minute, 10-minute mark helps. And don't stay there too long, because you might lose people into just losing consciousness. Wait a while and then start to raise it up, and then the combinatory mixtures would start to happen again. You're making sure that in that soup, you're putting in vibrations in the pot all over the place. So even when you choose like on a live music, people get really good at selection. So when you listen to a lot of music, let's say you're shopping around in YouTube or Spotify, you can instantly hear what would work in an inner dance context. And usually what would work in an inner dance context would be music that has so even as like something like this is happening, there would be a lot of this, there would be like deep bass even while a rhythm is taking place. There are musics that have the rhythm, but if there's no depth held in it, it doesn't lead to a trance-like state. People don't go deep when something's not holding it below. So when you choose music, what would actually be interesting is even as the wave is starting to happen, something below is holding it in place. You know, so you're representing all of the waves. It's not really accurate to look at just the wave being delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma are separate from each other. Even when you choose a number 2 and number 3, a lot of the songs that you would choose would have something meditative in the background. And if it doesn't contain that, then look for an app, like a DJ app, that allows you to play 2 or 3 songs together. Or if you don't want to be fiddling with knobs and like screens during the process, then go to an editing suite. It's called a digital audio workstation, like Logic Pro or GarageBand. And what you do is you prepare the wave ahead of time. You put the gamma, the beta, the alpha states, and then you put a layer underneath, because these programs allow you to construct the energy whilst in your studio and not in the group space. So all you have to do is press play, and you know how the rising and falling would work because you yourself designed the wave, and you decided when is the switch based on the Dutch energy and not the French, not the African, what is specific to Holland that is not the same as other places. Yeah, I hope that helps. The questions are beautiful, and sometimes the answers are a lot more complex and straightforward. Okay, thank you. Natalia?
Master.
No, don't call me that.
Hi.
Thank you.
Sorry, what do you recommend about the volume? Like how it has to be very loud, or like or a lot of going? What do you recommend?
Okay. The first important thing is to make sure that you are in the same realm as speakers. You want to be in the same space as everyone in the room, so you know what people are hearing. So the first thing to understand is people are not going to be listening through their ears. So they're going to be listening from the body, and you would know that at the point when they can't even hear the music anymore. So you have to trust. You have to trust, Natalia, that people can hear even the smallest sounds. And a lot of the sounds will come from you, from your voice. Like you really need to sing, and you need to kind of sing even with your hands. So loud volume is usually more for the facilitator than the people themselves. It's because the facilitator is attached to the outcome, and that's actually coming from a lack of trust. They don't trust themselves, so they want to make sure something happens. But you should listen to your intuition, because you know when it's also too low. So it's really about learning to listen. But definitely when you shop around for a sound system, make sure that the bass levels are good, because delta states are what holds most of everything. And if you're choosing a speaker that has bad bass, something that crackles, something that's not something that's flat, it doesn't allow the bodies to receive the range. So you do need to put quality into that. I mean, almost anything would work if the energy is there, but if you do want consistency, you want a range. So yeah, volume would be key. In that sense, headphones don't actually work based on the fact that it's the body that's going to be listening. When people are in their headphones, we're thinking that the sound only enters the auditory cortex, but what's actually absorbing the sound is the cells. It's a cellular listening that becomes possible. You would know that. Some people might realize that when you get to a point where you're not actually breathing that much anymore, the breath becomes really, really shallow. And it seems like people are in that really deep zone. I think if you use music, you need to moderate your music. In innerdance, we don't use music so much. What we use is noise. We use noise applications. It could be sounds from a busy street, like a drone sound from India. And we like to mix sounds. So when you use that, that does need to envelope people. So not too much volume, it's more of surrounding people. So what we do in Maya is we have 4 or 5 speaker systems, and some of them are movable. So we would put it in someone's chest. It would make changes when you don't do it too much, but when you move the speaker here, or then the speaker somewhere near the legs, what would happen is the mind would start to dislocate. Because when our eyes are open, we're usually seeing the world through here. But when you start to reposition these sounds and these vibrations, what happens is the mind would start to move to another space. Next thing you know, their mind is now in their legs. Then it goes beyond the legs and starts to go in that direction. The head starts to expand and becomes bigger, where this is not the head anymore. So feel free to experiment. Like put, let's say, a singing bowl in someone's chest and lightly, and then just let that spread ripples of waves, and then just keep moving. You will learn through experience, and if you don't experiment, the energy can't teach you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe one last, if there's any. Okay, Auntie, you're yeah, that's just a thumbs up. Is there any one last question? Paula.
Yeah. Hi, Pat. I want to know if there is a specific playlist to heal disease.
To feel which?
To heal, for healing disease, like an organ, like a liver, or like a cancer, or any function disorder of organ.
Yeah. Okay. This is such a complex question, and I'm glad it comes early. There's a lot that we know. Okay. We know at least enough about the energies, so that when a specific thing is happening, so let's say someone's crying. Let me give an example. I don't think he's here, but one of the people who are in inner intensive is actually a Spanish man who facilitates off of the Canary Islands, and him and his partner, they're here to learn. They're here for a month and a half. So for example, like the energy in Spain is all about the movement. That's what the trainings hold. Like if you're not moving, you're blocked. So when he came here, his energy was really wild. It was moving all the time. And one of his questions is, why am I not seeing anything? Why am I not seeing anything? So in Maya, we create a range. So each playlist, every session is different. Every facilitator comes here, they're experimenting with different zones. And there's a reason why you need different skills, so that you don't lead people to anticipate what you're going to do, which leads to the loop. So he wasn't seeing anything, but his body's always moving. And then 3 days ago, someone did a demo on him after I gave a lecture on body mapping, which is like, okay, what brain waves go to which brain lobe, and then what are the functions of each brain lobe. Okay, this is the activation or electricity that goes into the parietal lobe as opposed to the frontal lobe, the occipital lobe, or the temporal lobe, or the insular cortex. All of these have different functions, and they do control, they do hold some of the organs. So when you talk about the spleen, the pancreas, the liver, that would be more the digestive system that has connections in the autonomic nervous system that's either sympathetic or parasympathetic. And those could be mapped out, but we're not going to go into that because there's complexity in it. We know where electricity is spreading based on whether people are crying or seeing things or moving the body or remembering things, or sensing, like ants crawling around. These are super duper interesting. These are things we talk about. So the Spanish guy, Daniel, was really surprised like 2 days ago. It's like, oh my God, I'm seeing visions. And I was so depressed because I thought I'm the one who's never going to see visions. I'm just going to be moving all the time. And then this morning again, we held another session, and like he was just psychedelic. He was seeing things. It was like an ayahuasca experience. And then he didn't realize it. I told him, okay, wait, before you continue, can I ask a question? Was your body moving? And I said, oh, no. So he realized that suddenly the energy was vibrating in another section. It was in the occipital lobe that moved from the frontal lobe. So we know that, at least we know where the brain waves are emanating from. The delta is happening in the thalamus, alpha waves happen in the occipital lobe, the mu wave structure happens between the ears, the gamma state is across the whole gray area of the brain, the cortex. Beta waves happen in the frontal cortex. So if you know how to sequence these sounds, what you're going for is a greater spread throughout the whole brain. When you're stuck with just the movement, like some of these guys were, to help them to see means to be able to move the energy, which means you need to be able to navigate these waves effectively, sometimes one wave at a time, sometimes all together. Selection is about choosing the right one. Combining either means in time, you sequence it one at a time, or combining in space where they will go on together all at the same time. Maybe 2 layers, maybe 3 layers, maybe 4, maybe 5. So the time that we started to combine layers in space was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6. And brain mapping only arose in this process about 3 years ago. Understanding where the waves emanate from, it only happened maybe in the last year or year and a half. So working with doctors now, we're still in research modes as to which would be related to, let's say, hypertension or diabetes. So I'll be honest with you, that project only started late last year, and we're still in design work. So the programs, let me give you an example. Maybe this would be a little bit too long, but when we create the playlist systems in Maya, at least in my studio, and other people are mimicking this in their own studios, we're learning to do the music or sound selection process a lot more concentratedly. So let's just wait for my Ableton to show up. Ableton is just a mirror. We have other systems that are more in the machines. So when you look at these, I don't know if this is perceivable from your screen. delta, theta, alpha, mu, beta, gamma, and HOF. We're able to organize the different sounds, the different tonalities, the different structures in a way that is able to still hold the infinite, like infinite choices, but it's able to organize this in accordance to this. All right, and then to brain mapping. All these make sense to us musically in many ways, so that we can do interpretations with doctors and parents and teachers, that holds complexity. I don't know how much people would be interested in that in the long term, because this does demand some careful study work, of which we are doing right now. So to work with doctors, because you're talking about disease, there has to be collaboration, and we are in constant communication with them. I actually took the Dr. Rami Paredes, one of the most prominent integrative doctors in my country. I took him to the airport today. Like, he spent 2 nights with us. We're going into partnerships with a lot of the programs here, along with Dr. Mehdi, Dr. Anda. So this is new. And then we've created some basic entry playlists that are now being used by patients, and we're receiving feedback, but without more data, we can't actually just make knowledge claims. We can't just make things up. To achieve truth conditions, there needs to be epistemological ground, that if we're going to talk about something, we should know what we're doing. And we know a lot, but there's actually a lot we don't know. So hopefully we can explore these together. We're very honest in what we don't know, but we're very generous with what we do know, and we're just going to share all of that as much as possible. Thank you. Thank you, Paula. So I think we could close. It's been a grand 3 hours. I'm glad we could come into this doorway. The circadian rhythms is deep. Don't simplify it. Circadian rhythmicity is the story of all stories. It's the story of the species. And this wave is changing because of media, because of we know so much, because of our energy process. The story is changing, and the story is bound by vibration. This story, okay, this needs to be visual. The story is our story. The story of vibration is our story. Anywhere you go around the world, the story holds. And the story is going to change. The ancient story is going to change, and we don't know what exactly it will look like. All we know is that the story vibration is changing right now, and it's happening inside each and every one of us. The time and space is that story, and we're shifting time perception, and more space. We're being revealed more space, more information. So for that to happen, the body can't stay the same. The brain can't stay the same. Our language, our thinking process can't stay the same. It needs to change for a new earth structure to come to us. So yeah, thank you for taking part in this discussion about that story, and we'll go deeper in the next months. Thank you for staying with the 1 month. We took a long time to get here. I wanted to arrive sooner, but I think it's better to do it organically. There's a lot more coming. We'll try to hold an inner dance session on Sunday, maybe same time. So we'll see you then. If you could unmute yourself now, I'd really grateful if you could help me to close the call. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good night. I think.
Thank you.
right there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye bye.
Mm,
You.
mm,
Bye.
thank you.